My name's Adam. I'm 28 now. And if you had told me at 18 that my own parents would someday be the ones calling me nonstop, begging for help, I would have laughed in your face. Or maybe cried. Back then, it was hard to imagine anything beyond the street corner I was sitting on with 2 duffel bags and nowhere to go. It was the night after my high school graduation. Most kids were out celebrating, getting cake shoved in their faces by laughing parents, opening cheesy cards stuffed with a little cash. Me? I came home to find my dad standing by the front door, my mom beside him with her arms crossed, and that same smug smile she always wore when she was about to say something cruel. Dad didn't waste time. He yanked my bags out of the hall closet, shoved them into my chest, and swung the front door open like he was taking out the trash. "You'll come crawling back," he said, his voice almost gleeful, like he was already picturing it. Mom just laughed, a short, mean sound, and when I hesitated, stunned, she leaned in and said, "Don't make this harder on yourself. You're not our problem anymore." Then she slammed the door. I stood there for a second, too numb to even breathe, until I heard the click of the lock. It wasn't like I hadn't seen it coming. For years, I was the family scapegoat. Everything was my fault, even things that had nothing to do with me. My brother failed a class? My fault for being a bad influence. My dad lost a job? My fault for being too expensive to raise. My mom got mad at a neighbor? Somehow that, too, traced back to me in her twisted mind. But somewhere deep down, I'd hoped that when it really mattered, a milestone like graduation, maybe they'd fake being decent. Maybe they'd pretend they cared. I guess that hope was the last thing they managed to crush before I left. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream. I just picked up my bags and started walking. It was summer, and the air was thick and heavy. I ended up at a 24-hour diner a few miles away. I nursed a single cup of coffee for hours, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do next. I didn't have a car. I didn't have much money. I didn't have anyone to call. My parents made sure of that over the years, cutting me off from extended family and making me too weird for most of my classmates. All I had was stubbornness. A thick, heavy ball of it that refused to let me do what they were so sure I'd do: crawl back, apologize, and beg. I spent that first week sleeping in the employee break room at the gas station where I'd just gotten a part-time job a month earlier. The manager, a guy named Phil who looked like he hadn't smiled since the 80s, pretended not to notice. Eventually, I saved up enough for a grimy room in a house full of other kids like me, kicked out, forgotten, stubborn enough to survive. It wasn't glamorous. Half the time the plumbing didn't work. The walls were so thin you could hear a whisper through them. But it was mine. No one could lock me out of it. The next few years were a grind. College wasn't an option, not yet. Anyway, I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs at a time. Fast food, stocking shelves, janitorial work. Whatever paid. There were nights I came home so tired I couldn't even make it to the bed before passing out. There were mornings I woke up with my face stuck to the kitchen table and the taste of cheap instant coffee in my mouth. But every time I thought about quitting, every time the exhaustion got so deep it felt like it was eating my bones, I pictured my dad's smirk, my mom's laugh, and the way the door had slammed shut in my face. I used their cruelty like a match to keep myself burning. By 22, I'd clawed my way into night classes at the local community college. It took forever, taking just 1 or 2 classes a semester while working full-time, but it felt like climbing out of a pit one bloody handhold at a time. I didn't have time for parties or vacations or anything normal people my age did. I barely had time to sleep. But every exam I passed felt like another slap in the face to the people who left me to rot. At 25, I finally transferred to a 4-year university. I got scholarships, grants, anything I could scrape together. I worked during the day, took classes at night. My roommates were a revolving door of strangers, but I didn't mind. I was used to being alone. I was good at it. I graduated at 27, a full 9 years after I stood outside my parents' house, bags at my feet. When I walked across that stage, I didn't expect anyone to be there cheering for me. And no one was. But I cheered for myself. I'd earned every second of it. After graduation, things finally started to click into place. I landed a good job at a startup that actually valued my grit. I got my own apartment, a real one this time, with working plumbing and thick walls. I bought a car that didn't sound like it was dying every time I hit the gas. For the first time in my life, I could breathe without feeling like I was waiting for the next punch to the gut. I didn't think about my parents much. I didn't need to. They were just background noise. Until one day, about 6 months ago, my phone started buzzing nonstop at work. I ignored it at first: meetings, deadlines, life. But when I finally glanced down, I saw a dozen missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. And then I saw a text from a number I knew all too well. Adam, please call us. It's important. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen or heard from them in a decade. Not a single birthday text. Not a Christmas card. Nothing. Not even when I changed addresses, updated my phone, left social media behind. Somehow, they'd found me. Curious despite myself, I scrolled through the other messages. They were all from my mom. Some short and frantic, please pick up. Others weirdly formal, we need to speak with you regarding a family matter. A few, alarmingly, were just photos, the old house looking battered and worn down, Dad looking gaunt and hollow-eyed, a foreclosure notice stuck to the front door. I stared at the screen for a long time, my thumb hovering over the call button. I could already hear their voices in my head, pleading, bargaining, trying to twist things around like they always did. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel scared. I just felt calm. Because for the first time ever, I had all the power. And they knew it. I was still standing there, heart pounding, when another message came through. This one wasn't like the others. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't apologetic. It was exactly what I should have expected from them, entitled, smug, as if they still believed they had the right to demand things from me. It just said, you owe us. I stared at that message, feeling something cold settle into my bones. I didn't respond right away. I didn't even move. I just stood there at my desk, the soft hum of the office around me fading into static. That one sentence, you owe us, echoed in my head, each word heavier than the last. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't regret. It was a command, the same way they used to bark orders at me like I was some kind of unpaid servant instead of their kid. They hadn't changed. Not even after all this time. I slipped my phone into my pocket and finished my workday like nothing happened. I answered emails. I sat through meetings. I even cracked a few jokes with my coworkers. But under it all, something had shifted. A door that had been locked for years had swung wide open, and there they were again, my parents, barging back into my life like they owned it. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring out the window at the city lights. My phone buzzed every few minutes, each vibration a silent scream for attention. I didn't answer. I thought about the kid I used to be, the one who slept on break room floors, who skipped meals so he could afford textbooks, who patched holes in his sneakers with duct tape. The kid they threw away like trash. You owe us. It was almost laughable. The next day, I got a call from an unknown number while I was grabbing coffee. Against my better judgment, I answered. I didn't say anything, just listened. Adam? Adam, are you there? It was my mother. Her voice sounded tight, brittle, like she was trying really hard to sound composed and failing miserably. Please. We need to talk. I stayed silent. We're in a bit of a situation, she continued, and I could practically hear her grinding her teeth. Your father's been very sick. We lost the house. Medical bills. Unemployment. It's been difficult. She waited, clearly expecting me to jump in, to offer sympathy, to care. I didn't. We're staying with friends for now, she said, her voice dripping with a bitterness that made it clear that was not her first choice. But it's temporary. We need help getting back on our feet. Just until things stabilize. You understand. Still, I said nothing. I could hear her breathing, shallow and irritated. And after everything we did for you, she added, her voice sharpening like a knife. There it was. The truth. This wasn't about family or love. It was about obligation. About their belief that parenting was some sort of transaction, and now it was time for me to pay up. I hung up without a word. I expected them to back off after that, to get the hint. But of course, they didn't. Over the next few weeks, the messages kept coming. Some were desperate, please. Adam, we're your parents. Some were furious. You wouldn't have anything if it weren't for us. Others were manipulative, trying to guilt-trip me with memories of the rare decent moments of my childhood, as if a few half-hearted Christmases and birthday cakes could erase years of cruelty. I blocked every number they used. It didn't stop them. One night, after a long shift at work, I found a letter taped to my apartment door. No envelope. Just a crumpled sheet of paper, scrawled in my mother's unmistakable handwriting. Adam, we're not asking for much. Just a place to stay until we can figure things out. You owe us at least that. After everything we sacrificed for you, this is the least you can do. Don't be selfish. Family is everything. I sat on the floor, the letter in my hands, feeling the familiar old anger bubbling up. Sacrificed? What had they sacrificed, exactly? Every time I struggled, they kicked me harder. Every time I stumbled, they laughed. Every moment they could have shown me love, they chose power instead. Family is everything when it suits them. I didn't sleep much that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about every moment that led to this point. The eviction. The bruises, not always physical, but just as painful. The way they sneered every time I showed a little hope, a little ambition. And then I thought about the life I had built without them. The friends who had become my family. The mentors who encouraged me when no one else would. The pride I felt every time I unlocked my own front door, paid my own bills, set my own path. I didn't know them a thing. A week later, I got a call from an old family friend, Mrs. Callahan, a sweet woman who used to live next door when I was a kid. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but she tracked me down through my LinkedIn profile, of all places. "Adam, sweetheart, I don't mean to meddle," she said gently, "but your parents, they're telling everyone you abandoned them." I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. Of course they were. Play the victim. Paint me as the villain. It was the only move they had left. "I just thought you should know," Mrs. Callahan said, hesitating. "They're trying to organize a fundraiser. They're telling people they raised you alone, gave you everything, and now you're throwing them away." I almost laughed. It was so absurd it barely even hurt. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly. "I appreciate it." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, the pieces sliding into place. They weren't just trying to guilt me privately anymore. They were going public, smearing my name, lying through their teeth to anyone who would listen. It wasn't enough that they had thrown me away. Now they wanted to rewrite the story to make themselves the heroes and me the villain. But not this time. Not anymore. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding, the beginnings of a plan forming in my mind. If they wanted a war, they were about to find out exactly how much they had underestimated the kid they thought would never survive without them. I didn't rush into anything. That was the old Adam, desperate for approval, desperate for scraps of kindness. The new Adam had learned patience. I spent the next couple of days gathering information. Quietly, carefully. First, I made a few calls to people from my old neighborhood. People who remembered the truth, the real truth. Mrs. Callahan was a goldmine. She told me stories I hadn't even heard myself, about the times she had seen my dad rough me up in the backyard, or my mom screaming so loud the neighbors had called the cops twice. They never showed up at the house, of course. My parents were experts at playing the concerned mom and dad whenever anyone official knocked on the door. I tracked down a few teachers from high school, too. One of them, Mr. Lowell, still remembered the night I came to school with a split lip and claimed I fell off my bike, even though he could see the fingerprints on my arms. He'd filed a report back then, but nothing came of it. Small town. Tight circles. People looked the other way. I gathered screenshots, testimonies, public records, every piece of the puzzle that proved what my childhood had really been like. Every missed CPS report, every police call that had mysteriously gone nowhere, every hospital visit for accidents that didn't match the injuries. Meanwhile, the fundraiser my parents were running started gaining traction. I stumbled across the page one night, a cheap-looking GoFundMe titled, "Help Us Reunite Our Family." It was full of fake sob stories about how they had sacrificed everything to raise me alone, how I had cut them off after they fell on hard times. They even included a photo of me from my high school graduation, the one night I had dared to hope they might show up, cropped to make it look like they had been there. I sat back in my chair, staring at the page, feeling a strange mix of anger and something almost like pity. They really believed this would work, that no one would question their story, that I would stay silent, like I always had. They had no idea who they were dealing with now. The final straw came when I got a text from a distant cousin, one of the few who hadn't cut me off completely after I left. She sent a screenshot of a group chat my mom had started, full of old family friends and relatives. In the messages, my mom wrote, "Adam is having a mental breakdown. He's making up stories about abuse to hurt us because he's ashamed of what he's become. Please, pray for him, and if you can spare anything to help us, we would be so grateful." They weren't just lying now. They were gaslighting everyone around them, painting me as unstable, dangerous, a threat to the very people who had hurt me most. Something in me snapped clean in two. I spent that entire night crafting a response, not a rant, not an angry, all-caps tirade. No, something better. I put together a public post, polite, calm, devastating. I started with the facts. Dates, times, places. I posted a photo of one of the old police reports. I posted the bruises I had taken photos of back when I was a scared teenager, thinking maybe someday I'd need proof. I included a brief, measured account of what life had been like behind closed doors, not graphic, not sensational, just the truth. Cold, hard truth. And then I ended it with this. I do not owe my abusers anything. Not money, not shelter, not forgiveness. I built my life without them, and I intend to keep it that way. Thank you to those who have supported me, and to those who believe their lies. I hope you never have to learn the truth the way I did. I posted it everywhere. Facebook, LinkedIn, even Twitter. I knew some people wouldn't believe me. That's how it always goes. But I also knew enough people would. Within hours, the backlash against my parents started. People who had donated to the fundraiser began demanding refunds. Friends and neighbors commented on the GoFundMe, calling them out for their lies. Old acquaintances from high school, people who had seen the bruises, heard the rumors, and stayed silent, finally spoke up. Mrs. Callahan left a comment that went semi-viral. I watched that boy walk to work in the rain because his parents wouldn't let him drive the family car. I saw him sleep in the gas station because they threw him out. Don't you dare pretend you were anything but cruel. The fundraiser was shut down within 2 days for violations of terms of service. My parents' carefully crafted narrative crumbled like wet paper. But the real fallout didn't hit until a local news outlet picked up the story. Small-town scandals spread fast, and once one reporter started digging, it didn't take long for the full picture to come out: the CPS reports, the hospital visits, the teachers' testimonies. My parents' reputation, the thing they clung to tighter than anything else, was obliterated. Friends stopped talking to them. Church groups disinvited them. The few relatives they had left, the ones who hadn't bought into their lies, cut ties. And through it all, I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. The truth spoke loud enough. I figured that would be the end of it. That they'd finally crawl back into whatever hole they came from, nursing their wounded pride. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd leave me alone. But I underestimated just how deep their entitlement ran. Because a few weeks later, I got another letter. This time, it wasn't a demand. It wasn't a plea. It was a threat. The letter was scribbled in my father's unmistakable handwriting. That same aggressive, jagged scrawl he used when he was furious. The paper was crumpled, like he had balled it up and then thought better of it, smoothing it out before stuffing it into the envelope. There was no greeting, no pretense of civility. We will sue you for defamation if you don't take everything down. You ruined our lives. You owe us for the years we spent raising you, feeding you, keeping a roof over your head. If you don't fix this, we'll make sure you regret it. At the bottom, in my mother's handwriting this time, a final line had been added in smaller letters. Please, Adam, don't do this to us. I read it once. Then I laughed. It wasn't a bitter, broken laugh like the ones I used to hide in my room after they tore into me. No, this was a laugh of pure, unfiltered disbelief. After everything, they still thought they could scare me. They still thought they had any power left. I folded the letter neatly and set it aside. I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Instead of responding, I called a lawyer, not a family lawyer, not a cheap one. A real, high-profile defamation attorney. The kind that didn't flinch when the words lawsuit and family were thrown into the same sentence. I showed him everything. The screenshots, the fundraiser, the public smearing, the letter. He leaned back in his chair when I finished and said, "They don't have a case. If anything, you do." He explained that because they had lied publicly and because I had hard evidence to back up my claims, I could actually countersue them for defamation, harassment, and emotional distress. At first, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to just wash my hands of them and move on. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that letting them walk away after trying to wreck my life again would be handing them a win. So I filed the paperwork. It wasn't about the money. Although the thought of them having to pay court fees they clearly couldn't afford was a nice bonus. It was about standing up for myself. For the 18-year-old kid they threw into the street like garbage. For every sleepless night, every skipped meal, every humiliation they thought I would never escape. When the lawsuit was served, the fallout was immediate. They tried to act tough at first, firing off angry emails and thinly veiled threats. But it was all bluster. The reality hit when their lawyer, some half-interested guy they clearly found through a budget ad, told them they didn't stand a chance. I offered them a deal: drop everything, admit they lied, issue a public apology, and the lawsuit would go away. No money exchanged. Just the truth, in writing, for everyone to see. It must have torn them apart to do it. A week later, their apology went live. It was half-hearted, obviously written through gritted teeth, but it was enough. They admitted that they had exaggerated the claims in their fundraiser, that they had mischaracterized my actions, that their treatment of me during my childhood had been misguided and harmful. I printed a copy and framed it. Petty? Maybe. But after everything, it felt right. The apology spread almost as fast as the original fundraiser had. People saw it. People remembered. Whatever sympathy they had tried to claw back evaporated. My parents lost what few social connections they had left. I heard through the grapevine that they ended up moving into a rundown apartment 2 towns over, living off what little savings they had left. I didn't check in. I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I was free, truly, completely free. And I wasn't wasting a second of it. The months after the lawsuit felt like stepping into the sunlight after years underground. I traveled for the first time. Real travel, not just moving to survive. I visited cities I'd only seen in books. I tried new foods, met new people, filled my life with color and light and laughter. I built friendships deeper than anything I had ever known growing up. Friends who showed up for me not because they wanted something, but because they cared. I even met someone, Sarah, who somehow understood all the broken pieces of me without needing to fix them. She just held them, gently, like they weren't something to be ashamed of. On my 29th birthday, Sarah threw me a surprise party. I walked into a room packed with people who knew the real me, the me I fought to become, and I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in years. Loved. Truly, deeply loved. During the party, after the cake and the laughter and the inevitable karaoke massacre, I slipped outside to catch my breath. I stood under the stars, the cool night air brushing my skin, and pulled out my phone. No missed calls. No desperate texts. No threats. Just peace. I thought about my parents then, not with anger, not even with sadness. Just nothing. They were like old, faded wallpaper in a house I no longer lived in. They had tried to destroy me. And in the end, all they had destroyed was themselves. I smiled to myself, pocketed my phone, and went back inside, back to the life I had built with my own 2 hands. A life they would never be part of. Not now. Not ever. And it was the sweetest victory I could have ever imagined.